Hello, everyone, and welcome to Team Early Childhood Podcast. This week, I am so happy and excited to have Dr. Jackie Musgrave. Hiya, Jackie.
Hello, Aaron.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely my pleasure, because we are going to be talking all about children's health, well-being, and a little bit about you as well. So, without further ado, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I will do. Well, I started off my professional life as a nurse, and then I went straight on to do my children's training in the Birmingham Children's Hospital. And the experience I had there of how children's health was addressed in those days. I mean, it was quite a long time ago, I have to say, but a lot has changed in that time. And that experience really stayed with me all of my nursing life. And I went into general practice and I was working with children alongside health visitors, doing immunization clinics and asthma clinics. And this interest in children's health has always been with me. But it really came to the fore when I started teaching foundation degree students, because a few years before that, I had started doing a little bit of teaching at our local college.
Yeah.
And initially, I went along to teach NNEB students how to bath babies. So I was doing that for 2 hours a week, and and I absolutely loved it. And then I went on to teach BTEC, and then about 2003, as part of widening participation, foundation degrees were developed, and we were offering them at the college I worked at. So I was asked if I would teach the health module. And so, as you know, foundation degree students are very, in the main, very experienced practitioners, often work for a long time in the field. And so they're drawing on their experience and developing their knowledge and criticality in order to get their foundation degree. And they taught me, really, because what I realized was a huge role they had in supporting children's health, promoting children's health. And my doctoral research looked at how practitioners developed inclusive environments for children with chronic health conditions like diabetes or asthma or eczema. So that was really my starting point. And what was so interesting was that these amazing foundation degree students, some of whom I'm still in touch with, they regarded what they were doing as common sense, but it's not common sense. It's amazing practice that they have developed, and ways of working with parents that are just a joy to watch, and learn about. So that was my introduction, really, looking at chronic health conditions. So that's where it all started, and I've moved on a little bit more since those days. So yeah, what would you like to talk about?
So I work closely with you, Jackie, on the Early Childhood Studies Degrees Network, and it's really interesting to be reminded, really, of where we've come from, because actually, just to listen to you there, about actually you started your career as a children's nurse, and that's what early childhood should be about. It's about that multi-professional lens, isn't it, of everybody coming together for children. And I'm not saying I forgot that you're a child nurse, but I think sometimes it's good to see things through different perspectives. And I just find it really fascinating where we all come from. Sorry, I just thought I'd throw that out there. So where are you at the moment? So what do you do at the moment, Jackie?
Well, at the moment, I'm working at the Open University, and my research is now very much looking at promoting children's health, and specifically, what can practitioners do and what do they do to to promote children's health.
Yeah.
And actually, they are fundamental um, to improving children's health. We all know that there are so many issues relating to children's health that are of real concern. 5 years ago, the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health put out a report saying the state of children's health. And there were concerns about communicable diseases, i.e., transmissible diseases, mental health, obesity. All the things that we were worried about then have become even more of a concern as we emerge from the restrictions that were put
Yeah,
in place because
absolutely.
of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think we only have to look at the closure of schools and the closure of early childhood settings to see just how important it is for children to have early childhood education and care and school to attend, because for so many children that is actually a place of safety. It
Mm.
may be the place where they get the most nourishment, i.e., actual food I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
um
And
Go on.
do you think that we, as educators, do you think that we've got a very important part to play in children's health moving forwards?
Absolutely critical. I don't know how long we've got here, Aaron, but I could talk about this all day. So please do butt
No,
in if
carry on. No,
I go on.
everyone would love to hear it, so carry on.
Well, when I started doing my research, probably about 10 years ago, I was looking at various government documents from the Department of Health, Department for Education, and quite often it's actually specified that early years settings will be professionals who can be involved in whatever the aim was. One specifically was about, I think it was 2012, the NICE guidance for social and emotional development in children
Yeah,
actually specified early years settings. Now, I think that there's probably a lot of practitioners who might be surprised to realize that they are being named as critical um, people in achieving the aim of improving health. However, again, this is why history is important and why
yeah,
looking at policy is important, because going back, because we had the Every Child Matters agenda, and then from that we had the development of the early years foundation stage. Now we're on about, I don't know, version 5 of that. And what if you scrutinize the aims and principles of the early years foundation stage, I counted up that there's something like 35 aims that all directly link to health, in improving health
right.
in young children. But that's not always made explicit. But just thinking about the environment, we know that there's a need to provide outdoor play. There are reports from the all-party parliamentary group reports that state the importance of physical activity in relation to mental health and well-being. We know that the environment needs to be healthy and safe for children. And of course, keeping a healthy and safe environment prevents falls and accidents, and hopefully does a lot to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. So there's countless examples of what we all have to do in our day-to-day work directly links to improving health and supporting health. And when I say supporting health, I'm thinking about children who have ongoing health conditions such as diabetes and so on. The level of intervention that many practitioners have for children with diabetes, making sure that their blood sugar is kept at a safe level, ensuring that their diet is what it needs to be, the right amount of carbohydrate. And in my doctoral research, one of the practitioners spoke about how if it was a cold day, for instance, the she had to think about the impact on the child of going outdoors,
Yeah.
and just really what might seem very small things, but for instance, a child with asthma on a cold day
Yeah.
might need to have a squirt of their inhaler to make sure that they don't get their chest tight and potentially get an asthma attack.
Absolutely.
So the ways that practitioners can and do work with children and families to support and promote health is incredibly critical. And actually, the government are really missing a trick on this, because
Mm.
if they've supported the policy of proper remuneration and recognition of what we do, and encourage this interdisciplinary working that you mentioned,
Yeah.
um, then there'd be there's a big space there where we could look at what the impact is of practitioners, and even more value to put to show for what
Yeah.
we do.
So would you say that early years practitioners are making an impact? Do they make an impact in practice with regards to children's health and well-being?
Yeah, I think that the problem is, of course, trying to prove how, because a lot of
Yes.
what early childhood practitioners do is almost like preventative and early interventionist approaches, isn't it?
Yeah,
If we
absolutely.
get the children out and enjoying being outdoors, running around, more more physical activity hopefully will reduce the risk of obesity. Providing healthy foods in the time that they're in the setting, again, not only good nourishment, but hopefully preventing obesity as well. So, like I say, that is always the problem with trying to prove what we do, because it's not so much a corrective, it's a
Yeah.
preventative approach.
Yeah. So if I was a nursery down the road and I'm listening to this podcast now, where would I start? So obviously you've already said that a lot of things that we're doing already are supporting children's health and well-being, which is great to hear. But what if I actually wanted to start kind of reading or getting some information? Where would you say a practitioner could start on that journey?
Well, there are quite a lot of publications. I'm very happy to give you a list of things that are, freely available. But some of my research that I've done is a really small pilot, because I was wanting. It took me a long time to answer that question that you've
Yeah.
just asked.
Yeah.
And what I actually did was look at what is available in schools for school nurses working with teachers and children in relation to child health promotion. And I found a toolkit, and so I adapted that for early childhood. So there's a 5-stage approach to this, and I'm writing all of this up, and it will be
Yeah.
available. But by auditing what is going on in your own setting is a really good starting point. And not only looking at the individual child and children, but the environment that the child lives in, because as we all know, poverty is the biggest negative determinant of health.
Yes.
And so looking at what the socioeconomic, sociocultural background are to the children and families, and looking at the conditions that children may have within the setting. I mean, one of the problems that I hear about time and time again, and it's not just in areas of poverty or deprivation, is the incidence of poor oral health. It, I mean, this just shocked me so much, but I read a research paper that stated that um, the highest reason for admitting children to hospital for an anaesthetic is removal of teeth that have
Oh gosh.
basically gone rotten.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and that's a really
That's quite
huge
stark,
problem.
really, isn't it? That's quite a big because general anaesthetic isn't really used that much. with children now. Really, it's it's so to have your teeth out, it's quite a big thing really for children nowadays. You know,
It's enormous.
yeah. I mean, you'd kind of think really that we've become more educated around health and well-being, but there's still a massive gap there, isn't there? You know, there's
There is a
still
massive gap, and it's something that has to be approached with huge sensitivity.
yeah,
And it's like, and although it's mostly or more prevalent, if you like, in areas of poverty,
yeah,
it can still be a problem in families who are more affluent. For instance, if you've got very busy families, it's
mm,
not that unusual for a child to be dropped off in their pajamas in the morning, at a setting or a
yeah,
childminder,
yeah,
and picked up at the close of play back in their pajamas. And if they fall asleep in the car or on the way home, you know, mum might transfer them to their bed or cot or whatever. So missing out on oral
yeah.
health. Now, that's not me saying that. That's
No,
what I found out through my research.
of
So,
course.
and a lot of busy families, and on the very busy families, rely on food that maybe isn't as good as
Yeah.
promoting healthy oral hygiene and development of teeth.
Yeah, I mean, going on the food aspect, I mean, when I worked in a children's centre, we were we were working with families about you can still eat healthily cheaply.
Yeah,
Um, but families, busy families, lifestyle changes, all sorts. When they're saying you can go to the chip shop and you can feed like four people for a fiver, um, this is what you're up against, isn't it? This is what families are up against. Um, and I don't know how to,
yeah.
how do we counterbalance that?
No, you're absolutely right. And again, my very small piece of research, what my co-researcher did, who is the family support worker in the setting, she really wanted to push forward the healthy eating agenda.
Right.
So she did loads of work with the families, trying to find out what went on at home and what their concerns were. And she found out rather, that the families were really short of either time or money or cooking facilities.
Yeah.
And what she saw her role as was trying to get them to change their perception. And what she did first of all was look at the lunch boxes, and she put up a display of some of the foods that had been sent in with the children's lunches. So some of the things that you might think were really healthy, and then
Yeah.
she put a bag of sugar to show how much sugar was in that food or drink, because it's not just healthy eating, it's healthy drinking too.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, she'd invited me to be there at the parents' evening, to answer any questions about our research. So the parents are coming in and looking at this display, and I saw their reaction. They could not believe that
Yeah.
some of the drinks, for instance, were so full of sugar. But the other thing that Karen did as well, because parents, like I said just now, parents don't have the time or the money to mess about. Basically, they want to provide food to children that they will eat,
Yeah.
and they didn't believe that the children would eat something like a West African curry, which had spinach and meat in it.
Yeah.
But she used their communication, whatever the name of it was, to send photographs off to the parents, showing them the child eating this food. And then, and they were all really simple recipes,
Yeah.
cheap but very nutritious, but just sometimes that time that's needed to prepare them. So she would then give the list of shopping ingredients, the way to cook the food, and simple things like, if families have got a freezer,
Mm.
making up a batch and putting them in and using them throughout the week. Now, Karen was really, really sensitive to the fact that the area was a very mixed area,
Yeah.
but a lot of the families live in not great housing. So, she knew she couldn't make assumptions about them having a cooker or
No,
a
of course, yeah,
freezer and
yeah,
all of that sort of thing. So she really did make a huge impression. And again, it's quite tricky to show any longitudinal evidence because young children are only in their setting for a certain amount of time, and they move on. But what we do know in relation to everything with child development, children are really very open to early experiences, aren't they? And one of the
absolutely,
things,
yeah.
yeah, one of the things I always say is nobody's ever born hating broccoli
No,
and only wanting to drink a sugary drink from a bottle.
but what happens, Jackie? Because as a child, I'm just tracking back as a child. I hated anything green, broccoli, sprouts. Now I'm an old fogue. I absolutely love them. Like, what happens to you?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes a lack of perseverance.
Right.
Again, this is not judgmental. It's just perhaps
No.
about another health education message. When children are very little, we have to persist. I think I'm pretty sure I've read that you need to expose a child to a food something like 15 times
Oh
in
wow.
order.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas if a child has something put in their mouth and they spit it out, parents mostly think, oh no, they don't like it,
Yeah.
I'll give them something else. And so it just and there's so much choice of food these days. That's the thing, isn't it? Whereas
Yeah.
not so many years ago there was limited choice, and you just had to eat what you were given, really. But
Absolutely.
and again, I'm very conscious that's the case for many families nowadays. But the point I'm making is that sometimes you just need to stick with it to help the child develop the taste
Yeah.
and appreciate it, and at least tolerate it, even if they don't love it.
And I suppose it's knowing your children as well, isn't it? Because not all children will be able to eat all foods, because of allergies so
Oh
again,
yeah.
health wise, just knowing your children. I mean, however, there are going to be children out there that will dislike certain things. You can be persistent, but if they don't want to eat it, that they're not, they don't like it. I mean, I've never liked celery from a child, or
Hmm.
even raw tomatoes, and I still don't like them today. And that was a choice from childhood, and it's gone into adulthood. Now I love sprouts and broccoli, but I can't touch celery and tomatoes. It just doesn't, I can't do it. So, what I'm trying to say is some children will
And
ultimately choose that they don't like things, and
oh
that,
yeah, and I
yeah,
think yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we should go around absolutely force
yeah,
feeding,
yeah,
but actually, I think that sometimes when we naturally are not um, lovers of certain, or even just don't like certain foods,
yeah,
sometimes I think it can be because there's an intolerance,
yeah, of course,
or
yeah,
some sort of physiological reaction that makes us dislike them. For instance, tomatoes are a very common food that children or any
oh
adults,
really, oh right,
yeah,
okay,
and kiwi, you can actually be properly allergic to. I think we're all aware of nuts, but
yes,
um,
yeah,
sesame, strawberries, kiwi, fish, carrots, you can really be
wow,
allergic to anything.
you can,
So,
yeah,
although I've said about, persistence, yeah, you're quite right. You wouldn't ever force
no.
the issue too much. But like you've just said, you like broccoli, sprouts. If you want to get green veg into a child's diet, so try whichever ones are popular.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm listening now, and that one of those things that you said about having the visuals of sugar, for parents, would you say having things like that in the setting so that parents can see is a good move, moving forwards? I mean,
Ab-
also for practitioners as well, I would imagine.
yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, the again when this pilot, the practitioners realised that if they were going to introduce water only to the nursery, except of course with the babies,
Yeah,
then they had to model that behaviour themselves. So they all moved over to drinking only water, and similarly, they couldn't eat food that that was banned, if you like, for the
yeah, of course.
children,
Yeah,
if they were trying to improve the health of the children. So they all engaged with it, and they realized that particularly drinking water and drinking more frequently, they all felt less headachy,
Oh,
and
okay.
felt they themselves felt that they were feeling better, but also they felt the children's concentration span improved as well.
Wow, that's massive difference there. I mean, I mean myself, you know, I need to drink more water myself, but I'd be constantly off to the loo. So that's the only downside drinking lots of water, isn't it? But you know, normal practice. So if I say if I'm a nursery practitioner or an early childhood practitioner, and I want to just do some children's health things, how can I incorporate that into a curriculum? What type of couple of things would you suggest I do? I mean, you talked about oral hygiene. Could
Hmm.
we do something around that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's all sorts of activities. Some dentists are better at working with early childhood settings than others, but I
Right.
have heard of approaching dentist practices and asking the dental hygienist to go in
Oh,
and
okay.
start talking about oral health. But within your own everyday practices, one thing I think that's particularly gained a lot of attention over the last 2 years is about hand washing and the
Yeah.
importance of teaching children. You know, there's the hand washing song, and um, I mean, again, there's a very fine line between making children too anxious about things. I mean, I've heard a consultant at one of the big children's hospitals talk about how some children have developed germophobia over the
Oh,
last few
okay.
years. So it's a really fine line,
Yeah,
but
of course.
it's just so important that children do understand how to hand wash effectively, and more to the point, when to do it,
Yeah,
because they just get so absorbed, and
yeah.
don't necessarily think as you or I would about the importance of that.
Well, you can make it fun though, can't you, Jackie? You can make all of this aspect fun for children. You know, you can bring it into everyday play practices on nearly everything that we've talked about. You know, if we're going to do it for children,
Yeah.
which is great. You know, and I love the idea of getting parents involved. You know, because it's a whole community ethos, then, isn't it? You know, everybody's involved. So
And actually, that's a really important point, because we've as well, as a planet, we've struggled with finding the right answers to preventing and preventing obesity and reducing children's weight if they are already obese. So many things have been tried, and I think that the general consensus at the moment is it has to be a community whole setting approach, and with the families firmly at the center, and not only in the education and home setting, but the local community. Has the local community got outdoor spaces where children can run around?
yeah,
It, has it got access to food, shops where food can be bought that's healthy
yeah,
and cheap, or affordable, rather, that's the better word. Are there loads? I mean, there's a project that was done I think it was in the Philippines, and it was uh, describing how the presence of fast food outlets and lots of advertising for fast foods really had a very negative effect
oh,
on
okay,
children's understanding, if you like, and
yeah.
preferences for food. So
I think. I
it's
mean,
all around us.
I
Yeah.
mean, I when I was in practice, you know, you know, as a family support and children's centre remit, um, we used to tell parents that you know it was better to get frozen vegetables than no vegetables at all. So I think like any vegetables is better than none in your diet at all, isn't it? And
Oh
you know,
yeah.
you can go to a supermarket now and buy vegetables quite cheaply. Um, and actually you're getting all that nutrition and you know what I find though, Jackie, is that there's still a long way for us to go as early years educators as well as early childhood practitioners. And I wonder if there are materials out there that can really support us. And I know that you've written a lovely chapter actually. I read it the other day because I've just done a review on the book, which is on my website, which is called Early Years Foundation Stage Theory to Practice. It's the fourth edition, I believe.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and you wrote a lovely chapter in there, all on children's health and well-being. And this one got me thinking actually, because that book is obviously aimed at, embedding early years foundation stage, how to bring the theory to practice. But I suppose if anybody's reading that chapter of yours as an early years practitioner or as an early years educator, you know, how can we develop that theory to practice? Like what do we always mean by theory to practice? And how can we do that through health and well-being?
Well, if I don't answer it with how you,
Yeah, that's
in the
fine.
way you think, just
Yeah.
interject. But I suppose it starts with qualifications, doesn't it? And what what we learn and teach as practitioners. We have to understand why addressing health is so important, and we have to understand how the everyday practice of all the things that I've just said, how
Yeah.
we promote physical activity and how this in turn helps with development. All those really what feels like or sounds like very basic things, but how
Yes.
they actually lend themselves to supporting and promoting health. I mean, the big thing at the moment is, of course, mental health in very
Yeah.
young children,
Yeah.
and it's really important to appreciate that this isn't new. It's children have always had mental health difficulties, and it's only really since the 1950s, which is what's that, about 60, 70 years ago,
Yeah.
that child psychiatry became a specialism. And before that, it was felt that children, well, certainly, 100 years ago or more, it was felt that children couldn't have psychiatric problems and difficulties.
Mm,
Anyway, so we know more than we know better now.
of
But
course.
actually, what we need to really understand is that the early years foundation stage, for instance, and childcare practice around the world, we know what children need. They need to be listened to. They need to have their voice heard.
Yeah.
They need their basic physical needs met. Enough sleep, enough hydration, enough nourishment, all of those things. And if we and we they need to be protected as much as possible from health conditions that will make them unwell. And if all of those things are in place, that will underpin good health and good well-being, both physically and mentally. And so it's really understanding child development, I think, those theories that underpin uh, child development,
Yeah.
and then how what and just really teasing apart, for instance, risky play,
Mm.
just letting the child within boundaries, of course, and using common sense, if you like,
Yeah.
but letting them explore, letting them take that risk. And from that, they'll start, not only will they develop their own physical, their proprioception and their ability, both from the fine and gross motor skill point of view, but they'll build up resilience, which is part of good mental health. So it's really understanding, I think, reading these excellent books that are available that
Yeah.
explain the theories of all the areas of child development, but then thinking about how this impacts and helps contribute to a good physical and mental health for babies too, not just
Yeah, of
children.
course. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also for mothers carrying babies, for preparing for birth, because carrying the baby is just as important as well, isn't it? Um,
Absolutely.
so you talked about a piece of research that potentially is going to be coming out. Do you know when that's going to be ready?
Well, I have actually written a paper based on the pilot, and I can
Okay.
send you that. And I'm actually creating a course which is funded by the Open University, which will have the toolkit, which was the audit I mentioned,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
5 steps available for anybody to use. But yeah, I mean, the paper I can send to you gives
Yeah.
the steps in, and people can use that, develop their own sort of approach if they wanted to.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
absolutely great. And the course that you're doing with the Open University, will that be open access like the other courses, or will people potentially have to pay for it?
not at all. The Open University has a really strong commitment to social justice and
Oh,
are very aware of how important it is to do, what we're doing,
yeah,
make adults, professionals, and parents
yeah.
aware of the critical role that we can play in
Okay.
helping children to get better health throughout their life.
Lovely. So if anybody's waiting, Jackie will be sending me the paper, which I'll attach to this podcast. Actually, Jackie, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And everyone, please keep an eye out for the Open University on the health that Jackie Musgrave is putting together. But Jackie, thank you so much for coming and joining us on Team Early Childhood podcast. There's a couple of things I need to ask you before you go.
Mm-hmm.
Just at the end. Obviously, could you tell us 3 wishes? If I could grant you 3 wishes, what would they be?
For early childhood practitioners.
Yeah,
For early childhood to be regarded as just as important as school, for commitment from the government to pay and status, and for everybody from the professional point of view to understand what their critical role is in promoting the health physically and mentally
yeah.
of our very precious babies and children
Mm.
wherever they are.
That sounds fabulous. So, are those all your 3 wishes?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. Unless
great.
you
Okay.
think of any others
You,
I
I
could
mean,
say.
I'm happy for you to have 10 wishes if you'd like, Jackie. I mean, the world is your oyster. No, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I'm one of the lucky guys to know you and speak to you very often. And you are doing some amazing work in the area of children's health and well-being. So thank you, but also thank you for coming and joining us on the podcast.
It's been fabulous. And you said at the beginning the time will fly by, and it has. And it's
It
been an
has.
absolute
It has.
pleasure. And thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
Jackie.